In first seat, we have Darren on Kinnan. We're all familiar with this deck, and we all hate playing against it. At least I know I do. In second seat, we have Max on Etali Primal Conqueror. Kinda funny that I said nobody likes playing against Kinnan, cause nobody likes playing against Etali even more. Then, in the third seat, we have Luis on Sissay. This deck is really cool. I should learn it better. But what I do know is it looks to build a board full of legendary creatures before winning the game through a bunch of interaction. Then, in the fourth seat, we have Flubs, piloted by Sohail. This deck's pretty dang cool. You just cast stuff and cast stuff and cast stuff, and then oops, the game is over. Anyway, let's get into it. Dallin starts the game off with the snow-covered island. He pitches an Elvish Spirit Guide and casts Arcane Signet. He then casts Mox Opal and passes the turn to Max. Max plays the land that can tap for green and for red, casts a Bird of Paradise, and ships it to Luis. Luis plays the red-white dual land and casts a Ragavan with it. Luis then passes the turn. Sohail plays a basic mountain and ships it. Dallin plays a land and taps 3 to cast Rhystic Study. He then passes the turn. Max misses his land drop, but he does cast Reckless Barbarian. Max then ships the turn. Luis plays a land for turn. He then swings Ragavan at Dallin. Dallin takes the hit and exiles a land from the top of his library. Luis makes a treasure. Luis taps 2 for Falwar Stone. Rhystic Study triggers and Luis does not pay the 1. Luis then casts Deathrite Shaman. Rhystic Study triggers and Luis does not pay the 1. Luis ships it. Sohail plays a land for turn and casts Shenanigans, destroying Kinnan's Arcane Signet. Sohail then passes the turn, after not paying the 1 to Rhystic Study. Dallin plays a land for turn. He taps 2 and casts his commander Kinnan. He then taps 1 and casts Soul Ring. He taps the Soul Ring to cast a Felwar Stone. He then passes the turn. Max untaps and sacrifices his Reckless Barbarian to cast Treasonous Ogre. Nobody has any response, and Max pays 21 life to cast Etali, Primal Conqueror. From the Etali flip, Max gets Delighted Halfling, Veil of Summer, Bridgeworks Battle, and Lightning Bolt. The Lightning Bolt targets Kinnan, therefore Dallin casts Fierce Guardianship, targeting the Lightning Bolt. Luis, however, further responds and casts Flusterstorm. 3 copies target Fierce Guardianship, 3 copies target Bridgework Battle, and 1 copy targets Veil of Summer. Max pays 3 life for the Veil of Summer. Then, Fierce Guardianship is countered, Lightning Bolt resolves, and Bridgework Battle is also countered. Veil of Summer then resolves, and Max draws a card, and finally, Delighted Halfling also resolves. Oh, and by the way, nobody pays for any Rhystic Studies. Max then pays a Gaia's Cradle as land for turn, pays 3 life to Treasonous Ogre, and casts Ragavan. He uses his Cradle to pay for the Rhystic Study. Max then passes the turn. Luis heads straight into combat and hits Dallin with Ragavan again. He again exiles another land. Luis then taps 2 and casts Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Luis then passes the turn. He also does not pay the 1. Sohail untaps and he casts Warleader's Call. He pays for the Rhystic Study. Sohail then passes the turn. Dallin plays a land and casts Trinosphere, making all spells cost at least 3. He then casts Trophy Mage and grabs Basalt Monolith. Dallin casts Basalt Monolith. Luis, however, responds by tapping his Agatha's Soul Cauldron to exile Max's Reckless Barbarian and put a 1/1 counter on his Deathrite Shaman. Luis then sacrifices his Deathrite Shaman and adds 2 red mana. He uses that, his Falwar Stone, and a treasure to both pay for Rhystic Study and cast a Force Negation. Dallin miraculously has no response, and Basalt Monolith goes into exile. What a save. Max uses all of his mana and 5 life to flip Etali. Max then heads to combat and swings the 11-11 pretty much in fact at Dallin and the Ragavan at Sohil. Dallin blocks the Etali with his mage and takes 9 poison counters. With the Ragavan, Max exiles a land. Max then passes the turn. Luis too heads straight into combat as he swings his Ragavan at Dallin. Ragavan connects, Dallin loses 2 life, and Luis makes a treasure. Luis then taps 3 and casts his commander, and does not pay for the Rhystic Study. Luis then passes the turn. Unfortunately, because of the Chronosphere, Sohil is unable to do anything, and simply passes the turn. Dallin absolutely hates all of us and has no chill, so he then taps for 7 and casts an Overloaded Psychonic Rift. Overloaded Psychonic Rift resolves, and nobody has anything anymore. Max untaps, draws a card, plays a Gemstone Caverns as land for turn, and passes. Luis untaps, plays a land, and taps 3 for Delighted Halfling. It costs 3 because of the Chronosphere, and this means he doesn't have the mana to pay for the Rhystic Study. Luis then passes the turn. Sohil also just passes the turn. In Sohil's end step, Dallin casts a Worldly Tutor for 3 mana and gets Seaborn Muse to the top of his library. Dallin untaps and wastes no time before casting that Seaborn Muse. Seaborn Muse enters the battlefield. Dallin, then to make things even worse, casts the One Ring. Dallin then taps 3 and casts Mirage Mirror. Dallin then taps his One Ring to put a burden counter on it and draw a card. In Max's untap, both Max and Dallin untap. Max then draws a card. Max channels Beseiju to destroy the Chronosphere. Dallin responds by activating his One Ring. Dallin then activates Kinnan. Dallin puts a Hull Breacher Horror onto the battlefield. Beseiju happens. Dallin sacrifices his Emergence Zone to allow him to cast spells at flash speed this turn. Dallin then makes infinite mana with one of his Moxes and Soul Ring. Dallin then draws cards until he has a win with his One Ring, and Dallin wins the game. Thank you all for watching. If you guys didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. However, if you did, and if you made it this far, you probably did, leave it a thumbs up. It helps a lot. If you want to see more videos, click here. If you want to subscribe to the channel, and you should, it's free, click here. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.